Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the Rubbish Virtual Reality Cockpit Show. This is my second video, and it is a direct response to a negative comment that was made on my previous video a couple of years ago. If you haven't watched the previous video, it's not a big deal. It's quite long and, as one person pointed out, a little bit boring. But it was designed to be interesting for people who wanted to find a way to mount their newer style joysticks and throttles for the PC. There was a rather negative comment that was made about the one that I built being rubbish, which I found quite amusing because it was quite obvious that the person who posted that comment completely missed the point. But I was inspired by that comment because I wanted to improve the cockpit that I had built before, while at the same time making it as rubbishy as possible. So this is it right here. I'm sitting in it. This cockpit is built very largely out of rubbish, and you can do this at home quite easily, or something similar with fairly readily available materials. To explain to you where I'm coming from, back in 1996 I did have a virtual reality business, and I designed and my dad built really nice virtual reality cockpits. We had a box at the bottom made of plywood that came up about 8 inches. The rudder pedals were firmly bolted into that box. Bolted on, we went to an auto junkyard and got some really nice bucket seats, bolted the bucket seats down. The bottom box was at the width of that bucket car seat, and the bucket car seat still had the adjustment lever, so you could slide it forward, slide it back, and tilt the back of the chair for your own comfort. My dad then built in sidearms, side boxes, and at the time I was using the Thrustmaster F-16f LCS and TQS along with the Thrustmaster rudder control system, RCS, and those did not have bolt holes, so we actually had to build sliders so that they would build a kind of compartment inside the sides so that they would slide very tightly in and wouldn't move once they were lodged in place. And it made a great VR system that looked very slick and very professional for something that was built out of plywood. The problem with that for home VR is that the plywood gets very heavy after a while. Oh, and by the way, after the sidearms were built, they were a little bit unstable this way, so we simply took a piece of plywood and bolted it to the back of the boxes that came up, and then it was perfectly stable. It felt wonderful. But of course it was really heavy. It took 2 people to move one of those things. Of course I could have put it on casters, but it was still about 4 feet long, and didn't fit easily in the small apartment that I was living in. So I eventually had to put it in storage, and I've lost track of it since. Also, unfortunately, those Thrustmaster controllers were using the old MIDI style port, and at this present time, I can't even find anything that actually has game port support on a MIDI style port. Even the Saitek sound card I have that does have the port has no hardware support for game controllers. Anyway, when I was then living in a small apartment, I still wanted to play my cockpit style games, and I had the controllers, so I wanted an easy way to mount them. At that time I had a really nice old-fashioned rocking chair, straight back rocking chair with long arms that came out. And so all I did is I took a board off of a bookcase and I set the throttle, the joystick, and a keyboard on them, and I took black electrical tape and wrapped it around, and then just set it on the arms of the chair with the rudder pedals sitting, and since that apartment did have carpet, they just didn't move in the carpet. So that was a very nice, easy setup. Here I now live in Korea. I did not have an armchair. I had this chair, which I purchased new about 7 years ago. It has been through quite a few things, including my daughter at the age of 2 hand decorating it with various markers and paints. So it has hit the category of rubbish, either rubbish or a glorious, unique piece of artwork, whichever you like. It has a curved arms, so it was not suitable, but I simply needed to build up some arms, which was really quite easy. I recently threw away a bed frame, so these boards came off of a rubbish bed frame. And so I simply cut them with a really terrible saw. If you want to talk about rubbish, the tools that I have to work with are generally quite rubbishy. Anyway, I just cut these. They're screwed on to the chair. 2 screws here, 2 screws up here, and 2 screws down here, and moderately stable. Then last weekend I had a stroke of luck because I wanted to go back to the board idea. I measured the bases of, this is the Saitek X-65f, nice heavy metal. They've held up quite well, and they have the bolt holes. I went out to the rubbish area in my apartment complex, and someone had thrown away a dresser. And right here, I brought my measuring tape with me to discover that these bases are 18 centimeters, and this board from the front of a drawer was 18 centimeters. So I removed the front of the drawer. There were 8 screws on there. I then drilled 4 holes here and 4 holes here, and these are secured on with zip ties. Once again, just as I did with the previous version of the Cockpit. You don't necessarily need to go get bolts for this. The zip ties, they're not perfectly stable, but they're certainly sufficient for the gaming that I'm doing. I can run the Cockpit this way. My joystick is a little bit more stable. Unfortunately, the zip ties I was using before were much nicer, but my daughter at the age of 2 discovered that it was really fun to take the zip ties and zip them up. And then my wife simply threw them away when I wasn't there, so I couldn't salvage the ones I was using before. So these tend to break, but not a big deal. It fits in with the rubbish theme. I have a rubbish chair, rubbish sidearms made of rubbish, a shelf made of rubbish, and rubbish zip ties. So the only thing that's not rubbish here is the F-65f, which very conveniently simply plugs into my computer directly with one USB cable, which I can then just plug in over here. I have my computer in front of me, off camera, directly in front of me is a 42-inch full HD TV, LG 3D. It's very, very nice. I am surrounded by a 7.1 surround system powered by Denon amplifier, 5 clip quintet speakers for the front and side and center, and in the back again 2 speakers that are perfectly functional, which I salvaged from the rubbish bin. People tend to throw away a lot of nice things here when I go to look at the garbage piles. Quality speakers are things that people throw away here quite often. My computer's resting on a rolling cart, so I can move that around. And unfortunately, some things about modern gaming have not quite caught up with the fact that people are sometimes using the large screen TVs. So, for example, if there is a heads-up display text on the screen, it's much easier to read it over here than it is to read it at a slight distance looking at my 42-inch TV, because if I bring this in right now, this screen is actually virtually larger This 27-inch screen at this distance is virtually larger than the 42-inch screen, which is about, less than 2 meters away from me. So this is simply held on with Velcro. Again, the Velcro was salvaged from the previous cockpit, so it also was rubbish. Maybe I shouldn't call it Velcro because it's not Velcro brand. It is hook and loop fastener. If I went with Velcro brand, I would be using half as much because Velcro brand is much, much stronger than this rather generic made in China hook and loop fastener that I'm using. But it is perfectly functional. So once it sits on here, it's all locked together. That's about as much leeway as there is. Actually trying to shake it in the weak area, you notice that there's nothing but 2 screws here and 2 screws here for each side that is actually holding it on, but the Velcro makes a nice tight fit, so the lateral pushing does very little to affect the way that this system holds together. Of course, I would love to add rudder pedals, and if I did, probably I would simply glue something like one of those cheap bath mats that stick to the floor really easily. Probably glue or tie something to the bottom of rudder pedals so I could just set them up, but then when I want to move this out of the way, then it's very easy. I did salvage some casters out of the rubbish pile, but this chair is not very suitable for casters, so I'm still looking for, well, I wish I'd taken 2 more of these drawer fronts when I had the chance, because I could have just screwed those under and then put the casters on the bottom to roll. But as it is, this system is very light, it moves very easily, and I can actually simply slide it across the floor over to the side of my living room when I'm not playing games. So this is my response. I do appreciate all of the comments. Actually, I even appreciate the negative comments, and the positive ones were really nice too. I was surprised when I found my first video framed in some do-it-yourself website. I was a little bit flattered by that, and although views have only grown very slowly on it, it looks like a few thousand people have actually watched what I originally did. Now, I think this setup is better. In the previous cockpit, I had a Korean-style floor chair, which is not very comfortable, and because of the very cheap materials used in its construction, leaning back very comfortably for a guy my size doesn't work very well, so I was still up like this, very tense. Here, with this kind of system, you notice this chair rocks, by the way. It rocks a little bit because it has a bow system here. There's nothing actually holding up the back here except this bowed wood that comes out in the front. I can lean back, I can relax, I can not be tense. When I go here, everything's very, very comfortable. So I think that I have greatly improved on my previous one, but I have certainly made it far more rubbishy than it had been previously. So I feel a little bit smug about that. I probably shouldn't, but I do. And thanks especially for whoever was denouncing the cockpit that I made before as rubbish. Here's something even more rubbishy that works better and is much more comfortable.